So good day everyone. How's your day? I hope that every one of you are feeling good and feeling enthusiastic right now. So before we proceed, let me introduce first myself. I am Julius Marias Padilla, 21 years of age, and a third year college student, and I am taking Bachelor Secondary Education, major in English at OAS Community College, Calzada, OAS Albay. So maybe some of you here are curious and trying to figure out what we'll be going to do to this video. So for today's video, we will be going to tackle or discuss our main topic, which is to understand and analyze the concept of realism or realistic approach or critics. So without further ado, come on, join me as we explore and understand the concept of realism. So this would be our lesson objectives. At the end of the discussion, students will able to understand the concept of realism or realistic approach or critics. The second one is to understand and analyze a literary text using realistic approach or critics. Before we proceed to our discussion proper, let's have first our opener. So this opener serves as our refresh or to refresh our minds for at least remember or use our stock knowledge or your previous ideas when it comes to this topic. So here in our opener, I prepared three images. So these three images or pictures, you will be going to analyze the image or say or what is your observations about the picture. So are you ready? So this is the first picture. What did you observe? So if you observe, there is a hand which was chained or locked up by a chain. So if you think that if you observe, it is a person which was controlled or manipulated by someone. So this picture is about, or it symbolizes being oppressed or oppressions. So this is our next picture or image. So what did you observe? Of course, there is a group of people who are looking the right side of the image, but there is someone who is directly looking on us or looking directly on us. So what did you observe about the picture? So the picture depicts that the person, so a black woman, was looking directly on us because of maybe it is a criticisms or judgment toward his cultural identity. Yes. So do you think, what is this? It is an issue of racism, right? That's right. So the picture depicts of an issue or a social issues which is racism. This is the last picture. I guess the last picture. The third picture. So what did you observe about the picture? You look great, or you're doing great job, guys, in guessing our images. So this picture is about, yes, if you see, there is a trophy. So what did you observe? It is, yes, someone said telling that it is about victory or success. Or it is yes. So the picture is it's very easy. It is about a trophy which symbolize success. Yes, someone is saying that success, achievements, victories. Yes, so this is about success. So let's give our hands ourselves for doing great job in guessing our three images. So, if you have noticed, these three words are um, somehow connected to one another. So I have a question. What do you think is the relationship of these three words? Do they exist? So if you have any answers, if you have answers, you can answer it on your own, and I will give time enough time for you to answer this. So I guess you're done doing your own answer or perceptions about the three pictures. So these three pictures are interrelated to one another. Perhaps this will be found in the poem that we will be going to read after. So these three words are connected to one another where it um it shows, or it entails a realistic visions of society, realistic matter of the society, where there is other people who was oppressed by someone, being oppressed by someone, being controlled, being manipulated by someone because of greater power. In some side of that, there are people who are experience the issues of racism, being discriminated and criticized because of their skin color, their physical appearances, which is quite different on the others, or quite different from the others. And last is the victory, or the there is also um, in our life being experience of the success and victories we achieve in every day endeavors we have, or every goals or missions we have to do. I guess the brief explanation that I have said is enough for you to understand and to visualize the relationship of these three words. So I guess you are also ready to proceed on our discussion proper. But before that, I also prepared another sets of questions to freshen up our minds. So this activity is will be going to answer true or false, which was based on your stock knowledge or um, ideas about the topic that we will be going to discuss. The first question is, realism is used by writers in two chief ways: to identify prose fictions in the 19th century, and the other one is to designate a recurrent mode and represent human life experiences which exemplified by authors. So what do you think? It is true or false? Write down your answer. So let's proceed to number 2. As realistic fiction is not often opposed to romanticism fiction or romantic fiction. Again, realistic fiction is not often opposed to romantic fiction. What do you think? It is true or false? Last number 3. Realism involves not only a selection of subject matter, but a subject matter that represent an illusion of actual and ordinary experiences. So do you think it is true or false? And now, if you have noticed, I prepare or I post a poem. And this poem is entitled Still I Rise by Maya Angelou. So today, right now, I encourage everyone um, to read the text, or read the poem comprehensively, understand what the authors wanted to convey, observe and criticize on your own what the poem is about. So I encourage everyone to read the poem and understand what it is all about. So I guess you are done reading the text or reading the poem. So let's come now to the analysis of the poem. So the first question is, what is your generalizations? What is your generalizations or perceptions about the poem? In some ways, The poem tackles a situations of someone or group of people who experience being oppressed and criticized for some reasons. So the poem um, is about the experiences of someone or a group of people who was being oppressed or controlled by someone. So number two, what does the narrator point of view wants to entail? What do you think is the main purpose why the authors wrote this poem? Anyone? Okay. The poem is tackles, or the narrators itself wants to convey a message. It is about the willingness to surpass challenges in most positive way or optimistic way, in spite of all the judgment, all the challenges, all the criticisms they are facing off. Number three question is, if you analyze the poem, what do you think are the elements that can be seen in the poem? Of course, if we observe or analyze the poem itself um, um, entails or distinguish are real characters and settings. It was based on facts or based on um, someone's experiences. It entails a plausible plot. It also possess or entails real life occurrences or experiences, and it also entails a character development and importance of knowing what is the society about. So now number four, if you go back or if you remember the first activity, again the first activity we made, the guess it or live it, where you guessed three images, how those three words relate to one another in the poem. Three words are related to one another is because there is a situations or part of our situations, human situations, where someone are being oppressed, someone are being experience racism, and also as long as we go through these burdens, if we try to find ways to surpass this, of course we will eventually get the victory or success. So, what do you think is the main theme or the message of the poem? Primarily, the poem itself, Still I Rise, is a poem that evokes a message or a theme of being oppressed or the oppressions. It pertains to the issues which is racism. And another message or another theme that the poem entails is about the way we surpass things in an optimistic way or in a positive way, despite of all the burdens or the challenges that we are facing off. The theme of the poem tells us that no matter what it is, we should always put ourselves, or we should always think in a positive way, the way we surpass those challenges. So now I think you are ready for our main main discussion, which is to understand and analyze the concept of realism or realistic approach or critics. So now we proceed to our main topic, which is understanding and analyzing the concept of realism. So when we say realism, from the word itself real, which means truth, factual, and authentic. But when it comes in literature, realism pertains to the based on real life experiences without putting filters on or fictional matter. From the explanation, which in literature, realism is a written type which pertains human-based experiences or occurrence which is not filtered or add additional fictional matter. So in history, realism find its root way back in the early 19th century. So this genre responds to the romanticism which often oppose. So another information, realism is a written type which involves a subject matter that rendered actual and ordinary experiences. It focused on observing the society rather than writing subjects which do not touch the real world. So now, as we can see, there are also elements that literary realism have. So if you remember, I asked you about the poem Still I Rise. If do you see or do you observe any elements that was included in the poem? So these are the realistic characters and settings. So from the poem, realistic characters, it also pertains to those people who experience being oppressed and being experience the issues of racism. So to that poem, it also focused on the situations of Black Americans and also versus white Americans. So settings, of course, mostly if we from other literature that we read, I know you're familiar that most of the persons who experience the issues of racism is more on the Africans because of their skin colors, because of their cultural identity. So they become more um, prone to experience these issues. The next element is about comprehensive data about everyday occurrence. So from that poem, it possesses or it entails a situations that despite of being criticized, being discriminated by other people, we should always look for our own path to surpass those issues. So it also entails situations which usually not just the only African people who experience, but also some of people around some of human or individuals experience those issues, especially the racism, which is very relevant to our country, which is the Philippines. So the next element is about plausible plot. When we say plausible, it is synonymous to the word reasonable or reasonable, which is valid to argue with. So from the poem itself, the Still I Rise by Maya Angelou, the plausible plot there is the situations of those Black Americans during their life or their everyday occurrence during those times where racism are too dominant to them. So the next element is the character development and the importance of depicting social class issues. Also, if we observe again the poem Still I Rise, of course it entails or it exposed the situations of social class issues of Black Americans before. And also the poems tells us the character development, the Black Americans trying to surpass and deals those criticisms and discriminations they are experienced in a optimistic and in a um, conventional manner. Now let's proceed to the types of realism. So a while ago we discussed the elements of realism, and now we're going to proceed or to identify its own types. So realism has four types. The first one is the magical. Magical realism is a subgenre of this literature that expose a magical woven on the character and settings of the literary text. And example of this is the 100 Years of Solitude. So the second one is the social realism. Of course, this types expose or entails the situations or it explore the lives of workers and poors. It focuses on the working class, provides social commentary on the devastating condition of these people. So from social realism, also it focused on the social issues or social subject matter. Example of this is the of Mice and Men, and of course the poem that we read a while ago. The third type of realism is we call naturalism. So naturalism is a scientific method, or used the scientific methods and scientific principles to explore human and their relationship. Example of this is a rose for Emily. So naturalism is just is a type of literary text of realisms, which author use scientific methods or scientific principles or processes to identify to identify a subject matter which relates to the everyday occurrence of human life or human experiences. And the last type of realism is called psychological. Psychological means mind of an individual. So this type focus into the psyche of the character rather than focusing on the plot. It looks more at the character's thought and motivations. So psychological realisms, they focus more on the cognitive or the psychological subject matter of an individual. They focus on the thoughts, ideas, and motivations of the characters rather than focusing on its own plot. Right now, we will proceed to our activity, drill drill to test if you're able to understand the discussions we discussed. So the direction is read the statement below and answer yes if you agree, and if not, you answer no. So number one question. Do you think, or do realistic writers help the readers to reflect and understand the message or their message through writing literary texts? Do you agree? Of course, yes, because one of the main reasons why writers write any literary text, either writer's major reason is to convey a message or a theme that helps the readers to realize and reflect on it. Number two, do realistic writers can be considered as a weapon of change? And just through writing, we can able to express authentic informations, or we should express detailed details or data that can evolve one's perceptions and observations. Number three, do you think that romanticism are more better than realism? Me, for realism is much better than romanticism, or entails an informations that can help us in our everyday living. Mostly, the subject matter of romanticism is more on love and romance. 4. The poem Still I Rise, do this poem depict important lessons? Again, do you think that the poem Still I Rise depict an important lessons? And what types of realism the poem is? So the poem Still I Rise always or considered a poem that depicts an important lessons in a way that we should always consider or celebrate our own individualities despite of our own differences. The last one is, do you think that realism can solve issues, especially realism? Why? Do you think that realism can solve any social issues or societal issues, and why? For me, realistic writers or realism itself can be a weapon to change or to solve any societal issues, because realism entails a realistic visions of life where it helps readers or individuals to realize. Now let's come up to the generalization of our topic. So again, how do we analyze or understand the concept of realism in terms of literature? What are the things that we need to consider first? Of course, the first thing that we must do when we're going to critics a literary text using realism is to identify the subject matter of this. What are the points of views, or what are the narrators wanted to convey to the readers. Number two, the first thing that we need to consider when we are going to critics a literary text, of course, we should identify the realistic characters and setting of this. When, of course, realism talks about the realistic vision of life, so we need to identify first the characters and the settings of this. Number two, we should always look for plausible plot of this. When we say again the plausible, it is talks about a reasonable arguments. So plausible plot that focus the entire literary text. Next, we should always consider the um, realistic of everyday occurrence of the poem. Of course, the realistic writers always convey a part of the poem that embodies human experiences or based on human experiences. And then the last is always, we should always look for the character development of the poem or of the story itself when we are going to use realism or a realistic approach or critics. Always look, or when we're going to write, of course, we should always consider the we should always focus rather to the societal issues that the poem will be depicted. So maybe, or I guess, you already understand the concept of realism. You already understand and even analyze what are the things that needs to be considered in realistic approach. So now I prepared an evaluations for you to test your understanding and of course your perceptions about the realism approach. So as you've noticed, I prepared here another poem which is entitled um, Hope is the Things with Feathers. So what you're going to do is to read comprehensively the poem, understand it, and of course after this you are able to you need to answer the following questions. So you read first the poem, understand it, and try to understand what the authors or what the narrator wanted to convey. So are you done reading the poem? So please proceed to answering the questions as posted in the visual presentation. So there are 5 questions there that you need to answer. So start now. And now I know that you're already done answering the questions. So let's try to answer the evaluations. So the first question is, what does the poems wanted to convey? So if you understand the poem, hope is the thing with feathers. So the authors wanted to convey or wants to entail the poem is um, about being hopeful in everything that we did, especially when we're in our darkest time, when we're experiencing problems, challenges that we felt very heavy to carry on. So the poem itself tackles that in everything we do, in everything we face, especially the challenges, there is always a hope or a place or a things or even a way for us to carry those problems. So we need only to be hopeful and only trust the process of its challenges, because at the end of the day there's only a way for us to carry that problem. The number 2 question is, using the realistic approach or realistic critics, identify the elements and types of realism. So if you understand again the poem, okay, the elements used In the poem entitled Hope is the Thing with Feathers, of course, the first is the realistic characters and setting. Though it seems that the poem doesn't mention any characters or any settings. So as we tried to analyze it, the realistic character is that is us, human. We are the characters of the poem, and the settings that is um, our everyday occurrence. So that is the first element that the poem have. The second element is about the plausible plot. When we say plausible plot, this is a reasonable argument. So from what we read, the poem is about um, not giving up on something that we are doing, especially when we are in the darkest time or in our period of challenges and burdens. So the poem itself wants us to realize that no matter how it hard, no matter how it difficult, there's only a possible way, there's only a way for us to overcome those challenges. We just need to be hopeful and try to find ways or be optimistic in many ways. So the third element is about everyday everyday occurrence. So as humans, of course, we all usually or we commonly experience challenges, burdens, and thorns in our life. So this is a realistic vision of life. It is part of our life that we need to conquer, we need to surpass. Challenges is always there for us to test our limits, to test our abilities on how we deal those challenges. So next element is the character development. So character development, of course, the poem tells us to be an optimistic person. We should always look for positivity. We should always look for proper or appropriate ways for us to handle those challenges. We just need to trust the process, patiently doing those things without giving things as fast as we can, because there is there is a right time to solve those challenges. And last is the depicting social class issues or societal issues. Of course, challenges, life situations is always be present in our lives. So again, these challenges always test our abilities on how we deal with those challenges. So I guess we already understand, and you already understand the poem that we read. So I hope you able to realize, and I hope you get something learn something new from that poem, rather. For your assignment, I want you to construct your own poem using realism or realistic approach or critics. So at this point, I know that you're already understand the concept of realism. So we are done discussing this, and I hope you learned something in our video or in our discussion today. So again, thank you for listening. Thank you for your utmost participations as we tackled and discussed the concept and how we analyze literary texts using realistic approach or critics. So thank you for listening again.